Welcome, everybody. My name is Terry Atman. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about emotional intelligence. I've got a background which is quite comprehensive when it comes to things like emotional intelligence and communicating in that way. So I'm really excited to offer this presentation. So what we want to do firstly is understand some very simple things. Well, what is emotional intelligence in the first place? Now, most people have come across the terminology and it's been interpreted in all sorts of ways. But simply, emotional intelligence is just your ability to be able to communicate with other people on a slightly deeper level than just using words. And that's what we want to explore today. So where we start today is firstly, I suppose, by getting to the next. That's it. Okay, emotional intelligence, it can be a great support for your workplace relationships, because relationships basically are built around safety, person feeling safe, and usually that safety is around emotions. Intellectually, a person might feel very safe, but emotionally they may not do. So the first thing we want to do is be able to build some trust through emotional awareness. Now, emotional awareness is not a difficult thing. It's just really a matter of observing what's going on with a person's body language, their mannerisms, the tone of their voice, and how you feel in their presence. So your way of building safety is going to be in somehow matching that and being in alignment with that. So first thing you need to obviously do is recognize and validate the other person's feelings. Now, their feelings have nothing to do with what's right or wrong. It's just how they're feeling at the time. And it's always a really good opener to acknowledge, well, how are you going? How are you feeling today? Or if you know something about them that is a little bit more personal, then you can inquire about that. But it's letting them know that you care and you're wanting to share a little bit more deeply with them. So it's the emotional connection that promotes the psychological safety. So that's really the basis of where we want to go today. Now, we should have some question time at the end, so that should be helpful. Now, one of the things to be really careful of here is to be able to identify the triggers that people have, and they're all different. Each person is going to have a different set of triggers, a different set of vulnerabilities. And you're not always going to know these things, so it's best to tread a little bit carefully. So the first thing, if you have the opportunity to have a chat with somebody who you don't know, don't presume anything. Just listen and be aware of how they communicate with you, how you feel in their presence. And if you find that their mannerisms or the conversation is triggering you a little bit, then the first thing you want to do is know what that trigger is and what has actually happened here. Because the trigger is not actually responsible, it's what is being triggered. So to deal with that from an initial point of view, first thing we want to do is create a little bit of a pause between the trigger or the emotional reaction that you're having yourself and your behavior. And there's a simple way of doing that, and we call that pause, breathe, label, and choose, which is very descriptive of of how you do it. Firstly, you put a little bit of a pause between your reaction and your behavior, just enough. Take a breath, and identify what's happened and how you're feeling, and then choose an appropriate response, not necessarily to win an argument or to put forward your point of view, but to soothe the situation, if you like. Because remember, we're talking about emotional intelligence here, not intellectual intelligence. So if you then can reflect a little bit on the actions and what's happened, then you can go away with a little bit more knowledge about yourself and then be able to view future situations from perhaps a little bit more informed perspective. So reading people's emotional cues is really the ability to become empathetic with them. So you do that by, apart from what they're actually speaking about, you read their body language. How do they hold themselves? How are they presenting themselves to you? What's the tonality of their voice like? Are they harsh or are they soft and gentle with their voice? And what sort of gestures are they using? Are they rigid in their body or are they nice and relaxed? There's a lot of things that can be conveyed just by a person's body language. In fact, more information is shared through body language than it is often through words. So first thing we need to do is start practicing the act of listening. So beginning by taking that little bit of time to listen to what the other person has to say. Whether you agree with it or not doesn't really matter. What really matters is whether they feel like you're listening to them. And if they do feel like that, straight away, that will help them feel a bit safer. So you remember in the beginning, we spoke about the fact that safety was the primary thing that is going to enable the communication. So your practice of listening is going to facilitate that in them, and they can feel more comfortable and more relaxed to be able to communicate to you. Beyond listening to them, well, again, you have to be mindful of the tonality, the body language, and their expression. And you will have a tendency to read those expressions and those personality traits through your own filters. But in general, they will indicate whether the person is comfortable or relaxed or resistant or defiant or whatever they are. And you take it from there. So empathetic phrases, to validate their feelings and help them feel safe is an important part of the communication. Now, all of this can happen in just a few moments before you start the important part of your conversation. Building empathy, building trust happens very much as a part of the combination between body language and how you use your voice and what you talk about. So if you can establish that up front and be able to get that empathy and that rapport with the person, you're already a long way there to building that emotionally and that empathy where communication can flow freely. So that's the intent, to be able to do that. Now, if you find that the person is somewhat not following what you want, or they're resistant, or let's say even aggressive, well, then you need to adjust yourself to that as well and acknowledge how they're feeling in the way of letting them know that you are listening. That is the primary thing that people are wanting. They want to know that somebody is listening. So that's where you start. From there, we will need to sort of learn, well, what do we do with it? How do we manage that once we've got it? So the primary thing: listen, validate, acknowledge, present your case with clarity and confidence. And that's really important, because it's the clarity and confidence that you present with that's going to make all the difference. You need to know what you're talking about, of course, and you need to be able to present it. So the more rapport you've got up front, the easier it's going to be to deliver whatever it is that you want from an emotionally intelligent point of view. Because really what you're doing is you're appealing to their emotion more than your mind. If they feel good about what you're talking about, then they will create a positive attitude toward it, and you would have accomplished your mission, and rapport would be ongoing. So it's always good to prepare a little bit, and you need to prepare yourself as well with a little bit of openness and broadness, so that whatever you encounter, whatever that other person presents to you, you can be okay with that. And with that, and your clarity of intent, you're already sort of off to a good start. So one of the things you can do to help that and to make that work much better for you is to invite the person into your idea. So instead of just forcibly telling them what you want or what your idea is, invite them in and say, well, what do you think about this idea? Or ask for their opinion in some way. Now, I know that in some cases that's not really possible, particularly if you are a team leader and you need to just, instruct. But where it comes down to a personal thing, particularly in sensitive situations, it's really important to firstly invite the person. That helps them feel like they have some authority within the situation. So begin by inviting them, and you can follow that by open-ended questions that helps include the person in the actual outcome. So even though you might know what the outcome is you want, it's going to be a lot more productive for you to get the person to come up with the same outcome themselves. And you're going to do that more effectively by asking them questions and steering those questions in a way that is going to help them come to the same conclusion as you have. Now, if they do that, then your mission's accomplished. They have made that change, and everybody is happy. So that's the first thing. Get them on your side and ask open-ended questions and help include them. Nobody really likes being told what to do. Everybody likes to be included in the outcome. So that is a definite important thing to remember. Now, there's many other things that you can use. Emotional intelligence is actually quite a large subject if you spread it out. And there's lots of different tools and techniques you can use. But simply, you really need to have some care for the person that's in front of you and acknowledge the fact that whatever they're feeling is as valid for them as what you're feeling is for you. Whether or not you agree with their rationale is another thing, but what they're feeling, you must always validate in some form or another if you want to gain that degree of rapport. So we're going to sort of spend a little bit more time here exploring some of the takeaways. Now, we're primarily social beings, and we need that social connection for us to be able to function well as human beings. So everywhere you have an opportunity to improve the quality of a relationship, it is really an important thing for you to do, because it's not going to just improve your ability to communicate, but it's going to help improve your relationship with yourself. And it's your relationship with yourself really that you're using to communicate with other people. If you have a good relationship with yourself and you are kind, caring, and empathetic to yourself, that's the type of expression you'll have with other people. And they will respond to that from that part of themselves. So emotional intelligence is not necessarily just a practice of what you do. It's something you become in yourself. So your ability to have that empathy for yourself and that compassion, particularly if you mess up and you look at your behavior and think, wow, I blew that one. And to look at that thinking, all right, well, don't beat myself up over that. What can I learn? And how can I make something good from this? And how can I make myself into a better person as a result? Which is really the art of gaining emotional intelligence. Because you can't do that work so much intellectually, even though it is sort of guided intellectually. So it's imperative in our life that relationships be maintained and fostered in the best way that they can, because our mental and emotional well-being is dependent on it. We're not going to have a really great, fulfilling life unless we have that quality of relationship. So first thing to do is start building that with yourself and being kind and caring to yourself, which will make it a lot easier for you to be kind and caring for others. If you are really looking at yourself in a negative light and seeing all the negative possibilities around you, you'll probably approach other people in the same way and trigger their negative responses and then wonder why they're not happy with communication. So this is the place to start. Everything's always going to start with yourself. So your ability to get in touch with your own emotional state, care about it, reflect on it, and bring it into operation by expressing it with other people. So that's emotional intelligence in a sense. So the first thing, we must, beyond all things, we must build trust by listening and acknowledging people. And if you want to do that successfully, the first thing you need to do is do it for yourself. So you need to listen to yourself, listen to your behavior, listen to your languaging, and imagine how that might be received by somebody else. What might a person feel? Not so much think, but what might a person feel with your communication? And is that feeling state going to help them feel safer, or is it going to threaten them in some way? So that's where you can really start with your emotional intelligence, beginning to listen and adjust your own behavior and your own communication with the aim of helping the other person or the people, if it's a group of people you're addressing, to help them feel comfortable and safe in the environment, because it's your job to build the environment that this communication is occurring in. Even though you could say that they have a responsibility too, but you're the one with the understanding of this. So if you can build an environment of safety, security, stability, and to some degree nurturing to the extent that you can within that context, you're going to straight away start down the road of having a much better relationship. Now, if you get triggered by the other person, it's better to use that technique of putting a bit of a brake on it and seeing, well, what's happening for me, and then processing it that way and understanding that there's something there for you to heal. So you can do that, but do that at a later date. Just know that there's something there for you to heal. So it's always important to respond in a calm manner if you're triggered, and step back a little bit, reflect on it. If you need to distance yourself from the triggering situation, do so. But otherwise, find a way to appropriately manage that. And remember, the communication, if it's to do with another person, the communication is always going to be improved if you stay calm and you stay responsible. And it's never going to help to retaliate or to get defensive in a situation. If you get defensive in any situation, even if you think that it's justified or warranted, it's not productive, because the first thing that happens if you get defensive is that you are telling the other person that you're guilty from their emotional point of view, maybe not rational. From their emotional point of view, they're going to see you as, well, he wouldn't be defensive if he wasn't guilty. So be careful of that one. Defensiveness really is not useful. However, it is useful to state your truth, state what is important to you, state how you understand the situation calmly, precisely, carefully, and then leave it at that. You don't need to explain further. Beyond that, if the person pushes you for more, just tell them that you haven't got anything more to say. That's as far as you can go. But you will consider further, and if you come up with anything more, you will let them know. But you're not being aggressive with the situation. You're responding to it in the most appropriate way, in a way that empowers you and doesn't disrespect the other person. So that will hopefully keep the situation in some sort of container until you can understand it better and work with that. So the practice of empathy, it's easy to talk about empathy, but empathy is a state of being. You can practice it, but it's also a state of being. And for you to practice it properly, you really need to become it. You need to become empathetic. And how do you do that? Well, simply thing is you need to be empathetic for yourself. And you can practice being empathetic to yourself by being empathetic to other people. So it's a sort of a two-way situation. How do you get there? Well, you get there by practicing it. And how do you practice it? You practice it from what you've already gained. So being empathetic is not a weakness at all. It's a strength. Weakness is backing down or retaliating or getting angry or frustrated or stonewalling the person, running away and not engaging. That's not going to help anybody. So your power is going to come largely through your ability to be empathetic, because the communication is more through emotion than it is through the words that you speak, even though they are necessary. So, as also already mentioned, you need to communicate with clarity and confidence. So you need to know what you're talking about. You need to be able to communicate that clearly with confidence. Now, those criteria are the same criteria for assertiveness. But for assertiveness, you'd add one more thing, and that is that you have to be doing all of that respectfully, because you can communicate with clarity and confidence, and you can be a bully doing it. But if you do it with confidence, it's going to be assertiveness. It's not going to be bullying. So that's the thing. Always want to respect another person's emotional state. You don't have to agree with it. Just acknowledge it and know that their state is as valuable to them as yours is to you. All right. Well, that's basically what we've got. There is a lot more that you can understand about emotional intelligence if you want to explore the idea. But if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to see if I can find a suitable answer for them. So has anybody got any questions? Okay, just have a look here. Is there a way I can help support someone and I can see stress? Yeah, so there is a way that you can support people, and that is by doing exactly what we're talking about. Firstly, being empathetic, because and acknowledging their experience, and whether or not you have had that experience or not, you can still acknowledge and you can still see if a person's struggling and if they need a little bit of support. But the best support you can often give somebody is just to listen to them, just to be present and listen with an empathetic response. You don't have to come up with answers. You don't have to tell them how to fix their problems. In fact, that's often the worst thing to do. But just to be present, hold the space, let them feel what they need to feel. And if they're really distressed, let them be that. Example of empathetic phrases. All right. An example of an empathetic phrase is, well, I can see that you're struggling here. Is there anything I can do to help? That would be a simple example. All right. The best way to diffuse a situation that has escalated between colleagues. Well, now we're getting into a different ball game here, because there's a whole lot of tactics you can use to diffuse situations. You're probably not easily going to diffuse it with practices of empathy. There's a whole set of different strategies that you'd want to use to diffuse things like that. But again, it's still going to come down to the same principles, that if you can somehow manufacture a state of safety, security, stability within the context of that dispute and bring about a more empathetic state for both parties, then you might be able to get some communication going. But that's a bigger subject than what we can talk about here. But I'm happy to talk about that at some other time if you really want. There is some certain ways that you can diffuse it, certain ways that you can deal with people that are aggressive in their nature, people that are prompting you for a negative response. But like I say, that's for another day. I'm sorry. But is there any other questions before we finish up here? All right. Well, what have we got here? Interaction, just extra advice for empathy in that context. Well, we have the basic information contained with what we talked about. Is going to support exactly that. It's just done through slightly different medium. You can learn to apply these things, whether it's in person, whether it's across social media, whether it's through emails, text, or any other way. It's the ability to have a soft, caring approach with the clarity and confidence of your own well-being at the same time. The greatest strength is going to come with the greatest amount of caring and compassion. It's not a weakness, it's a strength, because it takes a lot of strength to be compassionate, not only for others, but for yourself. So apply it across any platform, any platform at all, whether it's a telephone or you know, even writing a letter or a reference letter or a report or something like that. If it's going to be affecting somebody's emotional state, then be considerate of being empathetic in the language. It's easy to get abrasive in language, particularly if we're not confronting the person. So yeah, that's what I would suggest in that. All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending, and I hope that there's a few takeaways here. And you know, have a good relationship with everybody that you have in your life, and take care of yourselves. All right. Pleasure talking with you. Bye.